You ready? I now call to order the Thursday, February 24th, 2022 meeting of the City of Sugar Land Planning and Zoning Commission. Good evening, everyone. Thanks very much for being here. Item 3 is public comment. I understand we have several folks who are signed up to give public comment. I would ask you that you please approach the podium when I call your name. Try to confine your remarks to 3 minutes. We also have one that will be read into the record by the city secretary at the commenter's request. And these will be comments for items other than the public hearing, which is item 5A, which is the proposed rezoning of 7.869 acres from Plan Development, General Development, Plan Ordinance number 1969 to Plan Development, Final Development Plan for Imperial Highway 6 District Commercial Tract H Reserve A and B. That one we have a public hearing on, and so if you're here tonight to speak on that particular item, you may do that at that time. If you're here to speak on any other item that's on the agenda, you can do that now. And so I will begin by asking the following folks to come forward to make their public comments. The first is Richard Muller. Good evening, sir.
Hey, how are you?
You bet. I should probably ask for permission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Richard Muller, and just before I start, just a procedural question. I'm going to try to get it done in 3 minutes, but I hope you will indulge me if I run a little long. I know that there's been a lot of discussion on in favor of this proposal, and hopefully you'll give me some time. I think I've got an interesting proposal for everyone here. And then Kerry Gilbert is with me. He's going to speak afterwards, if that's okay. And I just want to, I know y'all can't ask questions during public comments, but is it appropriate for anybody to ask questions about my presentation when you actually take up the agenda item?
You know, I'll leave that to the discretion of individual council members, but typically, I mean, we won't ask questions of you, we'll ask questions of city staff or the applicant. I mean, if you raise an issue and a commissioner wants to ask a question of the applicant or city staff about the issue, they can do that, but there won't be direct Q&A with you or people in the audience.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, and you have 30 seconds left. No, I'm just kidding.
Well done. Appreciate it. Okay, so I've got the presentation in front of you, and my name is Richard Muller. I'm a landowner in the Sugar Creek Center, a development attorney. So when it comes to development and redevelopment, this is what I do for a living. And I'm here to speak out against the proposed rezoning that's on the agenda for later today. And I think the crux of the decision for you guys to make today is, are we going to do this incrementally, or are we going to do this comprehensively? And what's proposed is an incremental approach. The presentation I've got for you argues for a comprehensive approach. So the Sugar Creek Activity Center, Regional Activity Center, is bigger than one project. If you look at that activity center plus the area in Sugar Creek that is designated for redevelopment, you're talking about 284 acres of land that is designated for redevelopment in the city's plan. That's currently zoned for office or general business. There's no cohesive plan, theme, or other identity for that area. And that area has developed piecemeal since the 1980s. You had buildings built in the mid-80s, and you have a building being built right now, and it has spanned the gambit. So what you have there is what happens when you have piecemeal development and not comprehensive development. As I mentioned, both those areas were identified for redevelopment in the 2018 land use plan. If you turn to this page, the next page, that's the current zoning. And if you turn to the following page, you'll see the place where the apartment is being proposed. You cannot convert 284 acres to a regional activity center by putting an apartment complex on 8 acres. You just will not achieve the goal that was set forth in the land use plan. And you aren't following the process that the land use plan called for. If you look at the land use plan, there's a section in there, the roadmap to get to where we want to go. Land use plan is a great vision for the future. It really doesn't get to how you get there. That roadmap is a 50-step roadmap, none of which has been done, to my knowledge, on the entire 284 acres. So you adopted this great vision for this area. You said, this is what we're going to do to implement that vision. And I don't believe any of that's been done for the 284 acres. That roadmap calls for study, regulation, programming, and partnership. I'll give you an example. A regional activity center requires a major civic space. Where is the major civic space going to go in this regional activity center? Where is the park and ride or transit going to go in this regional activity center? All of which are elements of a regional activity center. Where's a comprehensive traffic impact analysis that shows the cumulative effect of all the redevelopment activity that has to happen to make this regional activity center what y'all want it to be? Rezoning a single parcel or each parcel at a time will not get you where you want to be. You can't cram all the elements of a regional activity center in an 8-acre tract. So how do you get there? Turn the page. This 284 acres is the greatest redevelopment opportunity in Sugar Land right now. You've got undeveloped property, you've got property that is ripe for redevelopment, and you've got a great economy that begs for it to happen. But you have to have partnerships. You cannot do this in a vacuum. If you look at this page, these are all the people that have to be involved in a comprehensive redevelopment plan, right? You've got to have the city. You've got to have the HOA. You've got to have the POA. You've got to have the individual landowners. You've got to have the county. You've got to have TxDOT. You've got to have Fort Bend ISD. Everybody has got to participate to make it work. And it requires planning on a regional basis, not on an 8-acre basis. How would you get there? You do an existing development assessment. You do a market study demand for the whole 284 acres. And then you would come up with a master plan for the redevelopment of the entire area. That's how you achieve the vision in the land use plan. What's being proposed will not get you there, and in fact, probably hurts your ability to do it. I'm almost there, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry. Comprehensive, I'm on this page. You've got to have a comprehensive redevelopment plan. You've got to have a land use plan. You have to rezone the entire area. What's being proposed tonight is taking 8 acres that's completely surrounded by office and rezoning it apartment. But that's not how this needs to work. It has to be done, the whole thing has to be done at once, because nobody's going to make an investment in your regional activity center if they don't know what their neighbor might be in the future. You got to recruit businesses. You got to provide financial incentives for people to redevelop. The guy in the shopping center across from me says he's making a ton of money. He doesn't have to spend any money and has no interest in redevelopment. So you've got to provide financial incentives. And you got to recruit businesses that want to develop the type of neighborhood you want to see. And perhaps you need a municipal management district or some other economic development tool to get you there. So my ask for you tonight is to deny the rezoning request because it fails to achieve the substantive requirements of the land use plan, and you haven't followed the procedural requirements. I ask you to recommend to the City Council that they turn the entire area over to their redevelopment team and come back with a comprehensive redevelopment plan for the whole area. And I would ask you to avoid any piecemeal zoning of anything in this area until that's done. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. And I know you mentioned I know you mentioned Mr. Gilbert. I'm going to do these in the order that I got them from city staff, but he is in there, so we'll get to that. All right. The second speaker is Debbie Kaufman. Good evening.
I hope my weight doesn't totally redo this. Good evening. I'm sorry. Can I speak in that, though? I don't want it to either, but I need it. Okay. I'm Debbie Kaufman. I'm a 27-year resident. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know there was a table here. Pardon me. I'll start over. Debbie Kaufman, a 27-year resident of Sugar Land, and I'm here to make comments tonight on the, and direct some of the questions that were asked by citizens and the commission back at the January 11th P&Z meeting on the rezoning of District of Sugar Creek. As a former co-chair of the Land Use Advisory Committee, I'm going to use the textbook for my presentation. There are 10 goals in the land use plan. The second goal is to create mixed-use activity. We can't, I'm sorry.
I'm seeing
There are 10 goals in the land use plan. The second goal is to create mixed-use activity centers, or regional activities in particular, what we're discussing tonight. So in the land use plan on page 73, we're going to look at exactly part of the description of how we're going to redevelop these, because we don't own all the properties at one time. They are owned by various entities. Each phase of development should contribute to the ultimate intended use. For example, the first phase of development in a center with primarily office should include other uses such as retail or residential to help balance the existing office uses. If we go over to the Sugar Creek Triangle, specifically, we're going to read that nearly all parcels in this area are developed. But redevelopment, and more significantly, new development around existing buildings can create a greater mix of uses and a more walkable area. Based on 143 developable acres in this activity center, calculated number of multifamily units is 435. The area should include support services for daytime office as well as nighttime resident population. So we looked at this and we saw exactly what this specific area of Sugar Land could do to be a regional activity center with multiple components. They do not all have to have civic components. Civic components could be just where we're sitting right here. It's also been presented that the applicant has to provide office, retail, commercial, along with multifamily. However, the acres being considered by Kaplan do not in themselves constitute a RAC with all of the requirements of a RAC. The parcel is a mere 5% of the developable acres and is supplying the residential that is lacking in the Sugar Creek Triangle to become a RAC. Therefore, Kaplan's not required to build these because these already exist in some form. And if I go to what has already also been talked about, the roadmap for development on page 131, action item number 15, we talked about the fact that within 1 or 2 years, we needed to evaluate and see if rezoning was necessary. It actually states to create new standard zoning districts or eliminate existing zoning districts for the whole of the RAC. Okay, that was 2018, 2 years, 2020. It is 2022. That has not been done. Most of this discussion could have been avoided if the new zoning was already in place. As a guiding document to the city's comprehensive plan, the land use plan is expected to be a textbook for P&Z and City Council when it comes to redevelopment and new development. The question of whether multifamily is appropriate within a RAC is already discussed and to the public, with P&Z, and with Council before it was adopted in 2018, and therefore seems ill-advised to disregard the land use guidelines or to cherry pick from them, as long as the applicant has adhered to the adopted plan, which in my understanding they have done. So after nearly 4 years since the plan was adopted, it's exciting to me to see a developer embrace our plan and work with our city to bring about a mutually beneficial project, and I look forward to the approval of the rezoning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Jack Martin. Good evening, sir.
I am one of the original residents in Sugar Creek, which will be most impacted by them bringing in what is more than likely a highly, potentially a low-income housing unit into this area, bringing the crime, the traffic to an area which doesn't need it. I have not spoken to a single resident in my entire neighborhood that has anything positive to say about this rezoning. We see no benefits for it. All we see are trouble and traffic. Why would you rezone an area where you have such livid opposition to it from 3 different subdivisions not wanting this close to their home? It's beyond me. The developers, and I've been to several previous meetings, have already told us that once this thing is built, they're leaving. They're selling the property and going someplace else. So they're basically coming in against, that's why they're not responding. They don't care that these people here don't want this. They're going to build it anyway because they're going to leave and dump it in the lap of some future person. Now, personally, I'll never have any business with anything that's in there, ever, because I will remember that this was done against it. And I will suffer permanently as long as I'm living in Sugar Creek from the crime, the traffic, and every other negative thing that can come from this. I'm at a complete loss as to why this needs to be zoned for this type of use.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker is Victor Litwinico. I hope I said that correctly, or close? Well, you can correct me, and then I won't make that mistake again.
My name is Victor Litwinenko. I'm a co-owner of 3 restaurants here in Town Square, Japaneros, Guru, and Jupiter. I wanted to show my support for the Lifestyle Center. I've been here for 28 years, and in my time, graduated high school here, went to U of H. I've seen a lot of young professionals that lived in Sugar Land. As soon as they get, they get a good job, have some disposable income, they leave the city. And we would like to keep them here. There's another misconception. I don't know if it's, old mentality that apartments mean low income. It's really just like a house. A house can be very affordable and a house can be very luxurious. The crime that low income apartments can bring to the area, I do understand that, but we have a good example of a lifestyle center right here in Town Square, Sugar Land Town Square, a prime destination for Sugar Land. And that's never been a crime issue. That's never been a traffic issue. In fact, if you look around, if that lifestyle center is good enough for Sugar Land, it should be good enough for any other development. You're also surrounded by, the best hotel in Sugar Land. I'm a little biased here, but the best restaurants in Sugar Land, and the best office space in Sugar Land. So it matters how you design it, how you develop it, the amenities that are in it. And initially, I guess I would have been against it if I thought it was going to be a low-income apartment complex. Like anything off of Dulles maybe scares Sugar Creek because that's what's there right now, but that's not what's coming in. If you look at the developments in Kirby, some of the nicest developments are over there. I've seen some of my friends that are making good money. They move over there. Not everybody wants a house with a yard. Sometimes they want to be around other people, other professionals, young engineers. It creates a good living environment to, raise children. Or often these people have the most disposable income to visit the restaurants nearby. On the other end of the spectrum, as an empty nester, you might want to move away from a home, but you want to stay close to your community. A luxury and apartment would be a good option. So I do support these type of developments. They've only enhanced other areas where they've come in. There's a good example right here. Nobody's ever complained about this one. In fact, it was designed into, what I think is the nicest development here in Sugar Land. So I strongly support this type of development as long as it's, well-built, good amenities, luxurious. The pricing controls a lot of the people that end up moving in. So if it's done the right way, which I think is going to be, I'm in all support of it. And actually, my brother-in-law, my partner, we would be interested in developing something nearby because of it. We've never been interested in that area other than now we're hearing about this. So I think it would, if it brings up our interest, I think it would perhaps bring other people interested in that area too, that they may have not considered it before. So yeah, just think about it. And, don't forget that this one worked out really well. So more of those is a good thing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Dennis Dowell. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, everyone. I'm actually the president of the Property Owners Association here in the condos. I've been a resident of Sugar Land since 1981. We moved into the condos right next door here when we were empty nesters. So we've enjoyed the lifestyle. We came here for the lifestyle, and I believe that the development of similar properties in Sugar Land will improve that lifestyle to a greater extent. It's always wonderful to be able to walk downstairs and go to the restaurants that we have to choose from here. We were condos as a definition. It went back and forth between condos and apartments in the original stages of planning, but right now we're about 50-50. Some of the owners actually rent to tenants, so we're actually a 50% apartment complex right here, 50% condos. I think that the lifestyle is really what this area has to offer, and I see this being what the new development will offer. The fact that the downsizing of families that in my generation need places to go, we want to give up those commitments that we have to a big lot and the mowing and taking care of the pool. It's been a great benefit for my wife and I to have lived here for 16 years. I think we were the third ones to move into the condos here. We love it here. We'd like to stay out of Houston to whatever extent we can. If we can get some restaurants that are just an exit away, it would be even better than the choice we have here. We love walking, but we'll drive down to the next exit to see the next level of restaurants that may come out into a new development area. I totally support the development. Hope that y'all will too, and thank you all for your time this evening.
Thank you. The next speaker is Kerry Gilbert.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name's Kerry Gilbert. I am a land planning consultant. I've been in this business for most of my life. I have designed a number of neighborhoods and communities around primarily the greater Houston area, but also throughout the state of Texas and around the country. But I can tell you that I'm most prideful of some of the neighborhoods that I designed for Sugar Land. I feel like my firm made a significant contribution to the city and the quality that's here and the quality of life. Our firm designed the majority of First Colony, all of New Territory. I have to refer to my notes because I'm getting old and I forget some of these things. Olive River Park, Brazos Landing, Riverstone, and I could go on and on and on and on. But we put our fingerprint on it, and I think that the quality that we all enjoy here now is evident. You've got a comprehensive plan. It's a good one. I actually went through there and just tried to absorb a lot of this stuff. I'm not sure who prepared there for the city, but I'm sure you paid a lot of money for it. And it's a good plan. It's a concept. It's not reality. You can't. The problem is now it's up to you guys to implement that plan or to further define it, make it come to reality. The one of the things, and of course, it's identified the area that we're all speaking of as a regional activity center. And one of the things about that regional activity center, I think Rich alluded to it in his comments, was that you need a public, identify a major public space. And you need to identify pedestrian trails. And you can't just make a lifestyle center happen by one project, especially the first project. So I think some of the things, that may be the perfect spot for a multifamily project. I don't know. I haven't studied the area, but the thing is, that's the point. I don't see how you could know either. And so what I would urge you to do is this tract of land actually has great access. It's centrally located. In my opinion, it'd be a perfect public space. But the point is, I don't know that either until you actually look at the area. So I would encourage you to ask your staff or a consultant to take a look at that. Not me, I'm retired. But to take a look at that area and come and implement your plan. And I think that's, I think that's the thing that we've all got to stay focused on. It's not just, I'm sure they do a quality job. I'm usually up here arguing on their behalf. But nevertheless, I think I would just ask you to take a look at that and implement your plan. Stick with it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I believe we have one more person for a public comment that's asked their comment to be read into the record. So if you'll take care of that at this time, please. Oh, that's it? Oh, that's all I have.
I'll read the comment that we received from Julia Mickham. Hello, my name is Julia Mickham, and I have been a Sugar Land resident for 30 years and in real estate for the past 25. I was inspired to become civically involved here after participating in that public service aphrodisiac Sugar Land 101. Not ever politically driven, the idea that we were really running our city was just amazing. I have since served in multiple capacities as neighborhood rep, president of my homeowners association, proponent of preserving Sugar Land heritage, a docent at the foundation, Fort Bend Chamber leadership, and of course 5 years on the Land Use Advisory Committee, which culminated with the adoption of our current plan. It is through that work especially that I came to understand the vital importance of mixed use. A thriving city is a living entity with many integral parts necessary for healthy function. Over 5 years, we studied similar cities and their evolution in positive or negative ways. The undeniable conclusion was that all parts contribute to the fruitful life of the whole. Having grown up in one of this country's highest density areas, New York City, I know how mixed use functions. Each block can be a complete whole. It's that cherished village of one's daily life. Just one benefit becomes the creation of a neighborhood with that polite familiarity which helps protect and care for everyone. When LUAC, Land Use Plan, discussed open shared spaces encouraging gathering or quiet enjoyment, we realized bonus. Participation there was fun. It was an amenity that people wanted, and it actually brought safety and security. In looking to our future, I ask the following. Why do we refuse to offer new residential options for those moving to and working in Sugar Land? Who will become our next leaders if we refuse to nurture the next generation and its request for a more walkable, pedestrian-friendly, and affordable mixed-use lifestyle? Are drive-through eateries and big-box stores, restaurants going to be the only option in Sugar Land? How far do we want to travel to shop, dine, learn, and care for others? The single-family bedroom community of the 50s, 70 years ago, served the boomers. We know who we are. Shall we be left to grow old and dusty in our single-family fortifications long after they have served our families? Our children having left us to reside in thriving, vibrant, mixed-use communities defined by walking, biking, shopping, work at home or not options. Let us open the future for them here in Sugar Land. The LUP describes how the Sugar Creek Triangle should evolve to support our future. The proposed rezoning and development by Kaplan are tailored to the goals made clear through those years of research and planning by the Land Use Advisory Committee. I urge us to stop protecting the old negatives and imagine what good this will bring to our community. Julia Mickham.
All right, thank you very much. And that concludes our public comment. We'll move on now to item 4A, consideration of an action on the minutes of the February 8th, 2022 meeting. Commissioners, you've received the minutes from that meeting in your packets. Any discussion?
Motion to approve.
Got a motion to approve from Commissioner Landine and a second from Commissioner Brown. Any other discussion? If you'll vote at this time.
Some of us got booted out.
It's making us log in again. It's not letting us click on it. I'll probably vote yea.
Well, I'll tell you the motion will pass. We'll see. Are you in? You're in.
You too.
Cheaty got him.
All right. You got a vote? It looks like that passes unanimously. All right, thank you, Commissioners. Our next item is item 5. What we will do is first do the review of and discussion of the proposed rezoning of 7.869 acres from Plan Development, General Development Plan Ordinance number 1969 to Plan Development, Final Development Plan, Imperial Highway 6 District Commercial Tract H, Reserve A and B. Laura Waller has the presentation. We'll hear from her, and then we'll move to the public hearing on that issue. Laura, good evening.
Good evening. So your first item tonight, this is a public hearing. It is for a potential rezoning of just over 7 or just under 8 acres for 2 reserves in Tract H of the Imperial Highway 6 Commercial District. So this is the area between Imperial Boulevard and Highway 6 at this intersection behind the big Imperial sign. It'll be a kind of an odd shape here beside this detention pond, and it'll include private access easement and 1 reserve to start with that has a building footprint, and then a reserve B for future development. So an overview, again, this is just under 8 acres at Highway 6 and Imperial Boulevard. It is 2 reserves and a 25-foot wide access easement that extends north from Imperial Boulevard. The Reserve A is proposed to have approximately 48,000 square foot office building, and then Reserve B would also contain a future office building. The 25-foot utility easement, or excuse me, access easement and utility easement is to be built north from Imperial Boulevard to the northern boundary of Reserve A during phase 1, and then continued north and then west to Highway 6 for phase 2 during the development of Reserve B, and include future access to Highway 6 and Crown Garden even further north up towards Tract I. This rezoning is for office and limited retail uses, and it's in line with the general land plan as well as the First Step PD general development plan. So here's the overall tract layout. This currently before you tonight is the FDP for just reserves A and B, but we wanted to include the overall layout for the entire Tract H to show approximate connections for access all the way through the development from Crown Garden Trail all the way down to Imperial. So here you can see there are 2 approximate cut-throughs to Highway 6 in the future, and as well as connections to Crown Garden Trail. So this is the site plan for this specific FDP. As mentioned, it includes Reserve A, which will have approximately 48,000 square foot office building, and then Reserve B, just over 4 acres to have a future development of an office building. This also would include the access easement, utility easement that you can see here would cut off for phase 1 at the northern boundary of Reserve A, and then continue on north and connect through to Highway 6 for Phase 2. The landscape plan, this just identifies an approximate location of the trees that are required per the text of the document. These include, I believe it's every 30 feet along the PAE, as well as every 30 feet along Highway 6. So there is quite a bit of tree coverage along those areas, as well as shrubbery to shield the parking from both the access easement and Imperial on Highway 6. The pedestrian and bicycle circulation plan identifies the 10-foot pathway here along Highway 6 that would connect up to the north towards Oyster Creek. So that will complete the connection for all of the Imperial area, as well as 5-foot sidewalks along the access easement and internal pedestrian walkways made of the special contrasting concrete to get across those parking lots. These are potential elevations for what the building might look like in the future. This is primarily to denote the architectural features that are called for in the FDP. It includes minimum insets and special features such as the metal materials that are reserved to canopies and trim, special architectural materials such as off-colored brick, different things like that. This also does note approximate maximum heights as well. These are site photographs. These are taken approximately from where the access easement will enter the site at Imperial. So you can see this first picture over here on the left. This is looking along Imperial Boulevard. This is the big Imperial sign towards, and then the airport in the distance. Here, this is kind of a middling shot. This the building will approximately be right here for the 48,000 square foot building. And then looking further north. So this would be up the access easement towards the detention pond in the back. This is the future land use plan map that was established in 2018, identifying this area as regional commercial services. This is an appropriate use. This does align with the proposed use list that is in the FDP. The public hearing qualifications were all met, including notification mailed out and posted in the newspaper and online. The HOA and developer were also notified, and a courtesy notification sign was placed at the property, as you saw in the site photos. There was an online form available to provide comments. Staff did not receive any online forms. We did get one phone call. That was a general phone call just asking what the public hearing was for. Staff is not aware of any opposition. So your initial consideration points for tonight is that the FDP is in alignment with the general land plan, the general development plan, and the future land use plan. There is a specific use list that's tailored to this development, and it limits commercial and services to accessory uses of a primary office building. Engineering staff has reviewed the traffic impact analysis and includes a phase 1 access from Imperial and phase 2 access from Highway 6, pending TxDOT approval, and the access easement to continue north towards Crown Garden Trail. This FDP also includes connection to the Imperial Greenbelt system. That includes the 10-foot shared use trail along Highway 6. Staff does recommend hosting the public hearing before conducting discussion and direction, and the applicant is present for a short presentation and then is also available for questions.
Thank you, Laura.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Peter Bosher with EHRA Senior Planner with the firm. With me tonight is Jerry Oakey with Johnson Development and Scott Shelburne, who represents the group who plan to buy and develop the medical office building on Reserve A. And hopefully if that goes well, they will be buying and developing an office building on Reserve B. And so about the only other comment I have to make is just recall one of the unusual characteristics of this property is how far back it sits back from Highway 6. There's over 100 feet between the paving of Highway 6 and the actual property compared to the usual 15 feet or so. And so it's very distinctive in that regard. Other than that, we are here for your questions.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. All right, at this time, I'm going to open the public hearing. We will receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on the proposed rezoning of 7.869 acres from Plan Development, General Development, Plan Ordinance number 1969 to Plan Development, Final Development Plan, Imperial Highway 6, District Commercial, Tract H, Reserve A and B. I see we have one person who signed up to speak, and that is Kathy Cortez. Hope I said Cortez. All right, come on down.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kathy Cortez. I have been a resident of Sugar Land for 30 years. I have been a resident of Imperial for 5 years. I think that it's important that you guys also hear what the residents feel about this development, because for the past 5 years, we've been promised lots of things and nothing's been done. And now that it's convenient to rezone certain properties, it's not convenient for the residents to stare at a 3-story building in their backyard. Our HOA is 100% run by Johnson Development, our developer. It has the few residents that are in the HOA are also part of Johnson Development. So the residents don't really have a lot of say-so. So we want you guys to know that the residents are against the 3-story medical building. We're fine that if y'all need to rezone from retail to office, but at least keep it 1 story. That's what we're asking of. You know, the people that live on the lake, we paid a lot premium to live there, to have a nice view. Nobody wants to sit there and stare at a 3-story building with lights. Even though the pictures they show make it look nice, it doesn't look like that. I live on that lake, the retention pond that they referred to. And so we just hope that you guys will be considerate of the residents and maybe take us into consideration. You know, we contribute to our HOA. Part of that contribution is, you know, to make that whole area of Constellation Field and where we live, to make it look nice. You know, it costs us $30,000 to maintain that fountain that everyone views and drives by. We're paying that. Our HOA, as the residents are. And I think it's time that we're heard, and y'all consider, you know, the things that you guys are zoning and rebuilding, with the whole marketplace thing not happening. We know that it's what's in the best interest of the city, but at the same time, you know, we just ask, our neighborhood is completely open. It's not like we have a fence to block off the view. So with them building all that, that is going to be our view of our backyard. So we just ask that y'all consider what the residents feel and maybe allow us to come and speak to you guys more instead of just listening to the developer and the HOA. So, and also the track they want to add, there's already so much traffic in our neighborhood. That's just going to add more traffic, people cutting through our neighborhood to get to Highway 6. So it's not really beneficial for our neighborhood unless they plan on adding stop signs or lights or, you know, things like that. So I appreciate you guys taking into consideration and know that we're very much against a 3-story building being built in our backyard. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else for public hearing on this item? All right, then I'll close the public hearing this time. We'll move on to item 6A, consideration of and action on a recommendation of the rezoning of 8 acres from Business Office B0 to Plan Development PD, final development plan for the district at Sugar Creek to members of City Council. Oh, man, I'm sorry. My bad. All right. Ignore what I just said. I make a lot of mistakes. We've heard the presentation and the public hearing. Let me ask for feedback on item 5A from the commissioners. Commissioner Smith, sorry, thank you.
Yeah, so, whoop. Okay, let's stay. So, Laura, one of the questions I have with this coming in, my understanding with the lake area that's right there, that as a part of the original plan that knew there would be commercial, but that commercial would be built in with, you know, some type of integration with and around that fountain.
is that now not a part of the overall plan with the commercial, given this rezoning?
So this is okay, sorry. Thank you, Jerry. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Jerry Olkey. I'm the general manager for Imperial Johnson and Johnson Development and responsible for this project. I believe the fountain that was referred to by the young lady is the roundabout fountain that's closer
Well,
to
no, I mean,
Constellation Field.
this is being developed right off of
I know,
the lake area.
But the fountain that costs $30,000 to maintain
Yeah.
is that big fountain in the roundabout.
Yeah.
These lakes have 3 fountains in them. They're more for keeping the water aerated and maintained. They do not take near that amount of money to operate those fountains. We have them in every lake out there. But we do have plans that as we come along with development in this region, it's always been proposed. We purposely did not design sidewalks that would go 360 degrees around that detention pond because we didn't necessarily want to invite people from the commercial area to be walking behind the homeowners of Crown Garden. So you won't see a trail system behind that lake. Other lakes that we have that are strictly residential, we have integrated trail system around the lakes. There's a 3-Finger Lake that's near near Quiet Cove and Silent Manor. It has a walking trail with mile markers on it all the way around it, but it is strictly residential in its area of location. So we specifically took into consideration not to directly invite commercial people taking their lunch breaks or whatever to be walking behind all of the homes of Crown Garden.
Yeah, I was more referring as to what that view would look like and the integration from the pond into the commercial. I mean, is the intent that it'll just be commercial buildings and then, concrete around the rest of the side of the retention pond?
Well, the retention pond in its own nature right now has a concrete head wall all the way around it. It's for slope protection. We have a very silty, sandy soil. That was built before any home was ever built. It was part of the initial construction, so it's been there the full time. We do have landscaping around the Crown Garden side, and as we start selling the tract, I'm looking at the map H,
Track H, yeah.
the ones that abut to it, there will be sidewalks. Part of the plan is to have walkability of this commercial. So as we do that, there will be sidewalks that will be along the 25-foot access easement. Will also be along the commercial side of the lake to integrate the various buildings that come through there. And there will be landscaping that will be installed with those commercial tracks. Will they fully screen 100% of every building? Can't speak to that, but there will be landscaping there.
And as a part of the original planning, was there a limitation on the height of the buildings to be developed in that area?
The only limitation is we have a abrogation agreement because of the proximity to Sugar Land Airport. Please don't quote me on the height, but 5 stories is the max height that can go. I forget what the actual footage is, but there's a distinct abrogation easement. That was at the limitation. We haven't had a potential buyer come in and want to do 5 stories. We're very gracious to have Scott and his team interested in doing a medical office building now with a 3-story plan.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Thanks very much. Commissioner Hart?
Thank you. So just for clarification, this isn't really a rezoning from one type of development to another type of development. It's always been commercial, correct?
Correct. So
And-
the general land plan, and the general development plan that it's currently zoned as have all called for this as office space.
And there were no other caveats to that zoning okay. So just to make sure that the residents know that it's always been zoned commercial. We are not rezoning this to something else. We're just rezoning it from a preliminary to a final development plan.
Correct.
So just want to make sure they're aware of that. How detailed are we getting in this one?
I mean, it's, we're doing just regular discussion, so whatever
Okay.
you feel like.
I guess I'm curious about the access off Highway 6. There's two access points that are limited, shown. This would be access only to the northbound lanes?
Correct. We do not have plans to have crossover traffic. It'll be right in, right out. Highway 6 right now is 3 lanes each way, and the technical spacing between the traffic signals, there's a traffic signal at Crown Garden Trail, and there's one at Imperial Boulevard. We have no intention, and the traffic impact study doesn't allow, because of the spacing requirements, to have another signal, and I would not advise trying to cross those 3 lanes without a signal.
Right. And I saw that there was a deceleration lane that was recommended into the first, the 28-foot PAE, but
correct.
Not one for the second one, nor an acceleration lane. I thought maybe because of the.
Well, the traffic study was specific for this tract, for this 7 acres, and therefore it doesn't particularly reference the other one. We have studied it on our end. Again, it was not part of this final development plan, but we have made sure that the spacing that is between those two is adequate to provide, and we fully expect the one to the north, what we label as driveway 2 and some other exhibits, will have a deceleration lane, and if the TIA warrants, we've already discussed with TxDOT and with city staff that it can be a dual purpose acceleration, deceleration lane between the two.
And I apologize. I didn't know that was, the first time I looked at it, I saw 2. And I'll retract the second question on. When I was reading through the Exhibit B, there's references to the director. And I know this is kind of getting in the weeds a bit, but because this becomes an ordinance, who's the director?
So the director is defined in our development code as either the director of the planning department or whoever she chooses to designate to be the planner for that case. So it's basically any city staff that's authorized to make decisions.
Okay. I think you addressed the height question I had on that building next to the airport, although there are other lights on top of the building.
I'm assuming if it's required by the abrogation easement, it'll be there, but we don't physically build the building. That'll come from our buyer and the planning.
For reference's sake, that's part of the site plan process. We do require that they get the FAA forms filled out.
And I noticed there was on the Exhibit B8, there's numbers corresponding to material types. I couldn't find any location of those numbers. I don't know whenever the next submittal comes in. Maybe I missed it somewhere, but. Even though it calls it out, full-size brick accent, there's a number 3 next to it. I didn't see a table or anything. Or footnotes or anything.
Okay,
Is there?
I'll make a note of that to have that referenced or removed.
Apart from that, thank you to the resident who came to speak out. One thing bothered me that you said, that we just listened to developers. That's not true at all. I'm enthusiastic that all of you are here tonight. It makes me nervous, but it also makes me happy. So thank you so much for coming and voicing your opinion. We do everything we can to listen to all parties concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown.
Actually, turn this on. Sorry, I got choked up earlier. All my questions have been answered by my fellow board members. I'm good.
Commissioner Usual, go ahead.
Thank you. So just a couple of questions, and I think all of us had written down how high is the maximum height. And so that's been answered with 5 stories, but are we codifying this as 3 stories with this?
Yes, well, this specific building will be 3 stories. The Reserve B would just have to follow the maximum height as allowed in the text of the document.
Okay. Looking at this, and the idea behind Reserve B, is there designs on a parking garage at this location?
No.
No, sir.
Okay. One of the questions, and I'm glad Doug's here because he's going to know that I paid attention to previous meeting. Are there any light cutoffs for this, for the residents that are there, for the parking lot or any other areas?
That's a standard requirement in our development code for all lighting to be full cutoff.
Okay.
Whether it's in the PD or a standard zoning district, it's required for both.
Okay. One of the things that I noticed is the leftover piece of this track just to the east is really kind of odd shaped. Does that pose a concern as the developer that you've got now a hard to sell location?
No, sir. We've had interested uses that are there. It is divided, of that 3.9 acres, that little green easement, that's the storm easement. And it may preclude a physical building being on it, but it doesn't mean that it can't be shared multi-building orientation, maybe similar to what the resident said about having smaller buildings as opposed to taller buildings.
Okay.
I mean, there's all sorts of potential. We like to polish our crystal ball and know what's going to happen there, but as of today, I don't have a specific buyer to dictate what that would be.
Thank you. One of the things that we talked about as well is the screening, the natural screening that would happen between the lake and the buildings. Am I understanding that correctly? That there's going to be vegetation, trees? Is that going in the 25 feet around the lake, or is that going up? It was hard for me to see on the landscape plan. My copy was a little small.
Well, with all of our builder guidelines for our architectural committee and review, we require a 10-foot landscape buffer around the perimeter of all the sites. So reserves A and B will have the buffer, which is happens to fall along the access easement, but the reserve, the 3.9 acres, the 6 acres, all of them would have landscape buffers, as well as currently the Imperial Redevelopment District owns the drainage easement for that detention pond and that lake. And we work very closely with them to enhance that as we have a use. So we don't want to go put a tree in and then have something comes up where that's the access point. That's
Sure.
Hate to pick up and try to move a mature tree. I'd rather plant one when we know what the building layout is and what the best sidewalk alignments will be. And then at that point, we will have the landscapers design and improve that. But we will work with the Imperial Redevelopment District for improvements on their land.
Okay. And then the last one, I don't think this impacts any of the, I know you, and I guess this is your sign, but this doesn't impact your sign that's there at the corner of Imperial and 6?
No, sir. We've previously cut that out with a landscape reserve and platted it. I believe it was platted with Imperial Boulevard.
Okay.
And yes, and so it's already been carved out, and that's why we distinctly kept the boundary for just this, just under 8 acres.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Preet?
Yeah, just a quick confirmation. I think it piggybacks Commissioner Hart's comment on the acceleration lane. So in the case analysis, on the traffic impact analysis, there was a recommendation of a left turn bay and then a right turn bay at the conclusion of phase 2. That addresses what specific sort of traffic pattern concern?
So that TIA is still under review.
Okay.
It has not been finalized. These are what the current recommendations are. This does all pen text dot approval and finalization, but that would be required before we can go forward with the site plan.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious what specific concerns. It looks like that's coming, and we'll flesh that out in more detail on the next go-around.
Yes.
That was my only concern. Thanks.
Commissioner Landine?
Yeah, a couple questions. One is there, so that the building is sitting in the middle of Reserve A, is there any reason compelling reason that that building's not pushed all the way toward Highway 6 to make for the maximum distance between homes and the building?
We left the site plan up for the potential buyer, and we used the medical office building as the maximum usage. And with their proposal for a phase 2 office building, it was the best site layout that we could come up with that would keep from having extensive walking for occupants of the building.
I figured it had to do with the parking setup.
It was keeping the parking as close proximity, but meeting the requirements for the medical office portion, which is, I believe, a little more stringent than the standard office.
And then my next, I guess it's probably more of a comment than a question, but I'd really urge you all to consider if there's a way to swap the sidewalk, put the sidewalk inside of the shrubbery to make it a little bit more human scale, so that you'd actually want to walk on that and not be, instead of walking right next to the 6-7 lanes of Highway 6 going at 65 miles an hour, just to make it more usable for both residents and the commercial users. Just something to consider.
We will definitely take a look at it and consider it. Again, just remember, there's almost 130 feet of right-of-way that's unused by TxDOT. There are existing power poles in that easement, and the thought was to have the sidewalk with the hedge separation from the cars, so you don't have that one guy with the big bumper that parks too close to the sidewalk. And then we always try to put the street trees on the street side. It just happens this is a long way from Highway 6, but that's just their right of way.
No, I understand. I mean, we all, as you go down Highway 6, along the, between 6 and, let's say, Williams Trace or Settlers Way, it's nobody uses a sidewalk, right? Because it's not, it's just not at scale to be used. So recognizing that those 6 lanes are going to turn into 10 at some point, I just would ask that you guys consider if there's a way to make it more.
Our hope would
scaled.
be that the interior access would be more inviting and draw people into the community and to be closer that way. But we'll definitely take it into consideration, but it is also 10-foot wide sidewalk. I know some of those sidewalks along existing Highway 6 are 5 foot, maybe 6 foot sometimes. So that makes it a little tighter for bicycles and people, but with the requirement of 10 foot along here, you can have people pass safely with each other. Maybe that'll enhance it also.
Got it. Thanks, Jerry. And one last question, this may be for Doug. Can you just confirm for the record, what is the maximum height given the navigation easement? Or proximity to the airport is probably a better way to ask the question.
For this, excuse me, for this location over here, from what I'm remembering, it was about approximately 125 to 135 feet realistically. As far as that, I believe it could definitely be easily up to a 5-story. Now, through this process, that can be looked at further. That's not the final thing. They know obviously of a 3-story building on the Tract A, but we'll double check. We'll present a little more final information from that, going back looking at the GDP and then how the airport's height has.
I just think it would be helpful for us to know what is this is taken into consideration both homes and airports.
Exactly.
What is the kind of legal allowable height? It would just be good information for us to have.
I believe what was in the first step PD was still realistically under what was likely, but we'll definitely take a look at that, revisit with the applicant a little bit, just so we've got an exact
And again, I'm
number
sure it's
for you.
under. I'm sure it's under. I just would like to know what's the upper bound.
Right.
So thanks. That's all.
Commissioner Simeon?
Thank you. Yeah, I think those requirements are mostly for the antenna or something that might be erected. That's where it comes into play. I've been doing some, I haven't been texting up here, folks. I need to disclose that. I was on Google Earth and I was doing some measurements and so forth. The young lady who spoke mentioned the view and the concern and the the homeowners are against it, against the development. At the closest house down here in this knuckle down here at the bottom to the Reserve A is on the order of 750 feet, if I got my measurements correct. And a three-story is what, 35? What is a story, 12
To
feet?
the top of the tower, it's currently marked at 56 feet.
But that's
58 feet.
Okay, okay. So, and does this community have a, like a see-through gate or iron gate? That it's not a wooden gate, wooden fence, I mean, not gates, but.
The homes that back up to the lake have wrought iron fence.
Wrought iron, that's,
Yes,
thank you. And the containment for the detention pond is a bulkhead in nature, right? It's not above grade.
Correct, well, it is a depressed detention.
Right.
And down at the normal water elevation,
Right.
there is a ring of concrete.
Right.
For wave action to keep from having erosion.
Right, but it's certainly
But it's
nothing
not
that'll
necessarily-
obstruct the view.
It's not obstructing the view.
Okay.
But when I think bulkhead, I think a vertical wall.
Yeah.
Or this one is a sloped.
Oh, okay,
Sloped,
okay.
so it's not necessarily hang your feet off the edge in the water. It's a sloped, slope pavement.
These remaining tracks, they could be developed in the same manner, correct? With the current zoning. And they could have buildings that are 3 and 5 story, right? Are limited to 5 story?
65. So under the general plan, there's a requirement along the residential for, I apologize, I don't have my glasses, but 65-foot building setback.
So along these areas that border the residential areas directly,
Right.
there's a 65-foot building setback and a minimum 25-foot landscape buffer inside that 65 feet.
Right, I mean, there are rules in place where we have commercial against residential, and this would trigger here.
Correct.
This would not trigger the CUP, it just triggers the FDP. So that's where you get your buffering process.
Okay. So again, the 3.9 acre and the 6 acre tracts down there at the bottom, they could receive the same type building, 3-story, 5-story?
Correct. As of right now, yes, because
Okay.
it's the general development plan only. Whenever that FDP moves forward, you would then be able to consider, do you want a more restrictive height or less restrictive?
Okay. Well, I see this as a reasonable fear and complaint at this juncture, but I think if this goes forward, the homeowners hopefully will be surprised in that something that's 700, 800 feet away and 3 stories high isn't that much of an eyesore as might be considered, as might be anticipated at this time. There might be a better argument for it when the 6 acre tract is developed, or maybe this 14 acre tract. I think that's all I had. It's kind of unfortunate you only have the one access off Imperial Boulevard, but and none off of 6 to speak of. I mean, a left turn, but that would probably require a signal over, in time. You don't need it right now. Absolutely. Anyway, thank you. Appreciate it. That's all I have.
All right, thanks, Commissioner. Just a couple questions. So my questions are mostly around the traffic piece. So I noted in the staff report, and you mentioned this as well, that the traffic impact analysis is under review. So what does that mean? And when is that going to get finalized? And will that be finalized before this would come back to us for consideration and action?
Good evening, it's Guillermo Salcedo, Engineering Department.
The TIA is still under review. One of the major comments is they need to get an agreement with TxDOT for those two entrances to the gas, so that takes a while for them. But we're still under review, and so far that's what we had, the left turn that they took, the diesel lane that we have there. It'll be concurrent until the permit from TxDOT it comes in. Basically, once that get in, we can concur with the TIA. So I don't know how long that takes.
That could be years with TxDOT. I would hope we're not going to shut down an office building for a driveway that I don't even have a building on the reserve yet. It's always been, I joined Johnson in 2011, and since 2007, when they took over the prior developer's Southern Land, there's always been an agreement that there would be two driveways between Crown Garden and Imperial Boulevard. It's a function of the spacing of them to allow for the proper distance of acceleration, deceleration lane. But there's always been an agreement with TxDOT that we would not ask for more than two, because then that would start crowding those acceleration and deceleration lanes. And there's ample room to cover all of that as it comes through. At the current time, I've got an office buyer who has a tenant for most of the building, if not all of the building. And TxDOT, since COVID, has been very slow to respond in formal writings. We have submitted to them. We are requesting letters from them. I can say that there was a previous one just north of Crown Garden Trail, actually north of the Oyster Creek there. It took us 18 months to get a permit from TxDOT. They didn't question the placement of the driveway because it had ample spacing. It took 18 months to get a piece of paper from them. I would just ask that, because the first building doesn't necessarily have to have that driveway. The TIA supports that they can have their access off Imperial Boulevard. The second building does require that. I'm working diligently to get that permit, but I would please ask you to consider, let's don't punish the buyer that I have in hand for a permit that doesn't impact his building. But I understand that I can't move forward with the second building until that I meet that requirement. It's just TxDOT is very long. So I just please consider.
Can you just add that to the end of phase one? The end of phase two.
That's what it says.
That's what it says.
That is what it says.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Well done.
We're talking about the TIA approval, making me wait for approval for that piece of paper that will.
Well, but the TIA should support the phase one development without the acceleration lane, so you don't need the permit from TxDOT to trigger it, right?
But if engineering won't formally approve the TIA, because it's all inclusive.
I see what
without the permit in hand, I'm a long way out and I lose.
I understand. So you're saying there's potential the TIA will not be.
If I have to have formal written approval, because it's all combined, it may say that it's not necessary for number two, but if engineering is going to make me wait till I have it in hand, and I'm 3 months,
okay,
maybe 3 months, December.
I'm confused. The TIA needs the permit to be approved?
It's something we need to concur in the TIA, but that's something we can work with Jerry on partial.
If the TIA doesn't recommend that driveway until phase two.
Correct.
It should be approved for phase one.
Yeah, that's something that we did the TIA for the entire area.
For all 7 acres. So it's a technicality that I believe we can work through. I just want to be clear, waiting for it before TIA approval, inferring that I won't be back in front of you till I have that permit in hand, has potential to be another 15 months. I hope it's faster than that, but that's just my concern.
Okay, understood. So focusing on then Reserve A for right now, I mean, let me not say that. Let me ask a better question. So what is the plan for access? Is the idea, since there's not going to be a driveway off of, there's not going to be direct access off of Highway 6, right? The access is going to be from Imperial?
Correct, from the 25-foot public access easement, as well as a secondary driveway that's just a right in, right out. It's not the primary access, but it meets the requirement for spacing between the two. It adds a second point of access for fire access if necessary, as well as on the public access easement, there's multiple access points there also. So we were trying to achieve this without, again, waiting for that full TxDOT permit blessing.
Okay, but you can come out on Imperial from Reserve A, and if you want to go south on Highway 6, you can just make a left turn there, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, my concern, and it's more probably with B than A, is if you're going to have access, you're going to have people coming out, going north on Highway 6, and how are they going to get to turn around? And I guess, hopefully you're going to tell me at a future date, the idea would be to route them around the back of the property, and I guess out on Imperial.
I think they're going to U-turn at the next intersection.
Correct, or they could U-turn at Crown Garden traffic signal, they could U-turn there. They could, as we continue to develop to the north, they could go all the way to Crown Garden and take the left there and use that traffic signal.
Okay. All right, thank you. And Laura, just can you review, I think this is in the record, but can you just review what the notification procedures were for the surrounding
Yes,
residents?
so notification is to send mail-outs to property owners within 200 feet, as well as post in a newspaper that's circulated locally. And I don't believe it's a state requirement, but we do courtesy notify with a sign at the property. And we also posted on our website. So those were all taken care of. We also sent a notification to the HOA and the developer.
All right, thank you. That's all I have. Anything else? All right, thanks very much. Appreciate it. All right, now we will move to item 6A. Fact finding and recommendation. We'll do consideration and action on a recommendation of the rezoning of 8 acres from Business Office B0 to Plan Development PD, Final Development Plan, FPD for the district at Sugar Creek, to the members of City Council. Lauren Fair. Lauren, good evening.
Hello. Make sure I talk into the mic this evening. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of just brief, couple slides of some the development proposal itself and just the brief background so that for members, purposes of the public and the record and everything. Then we'll jump into some discussion from the public hearing, hear a little bit about from our economic development team, and then focus in on the guidance we have from the code and from the land use plan. So start off just to orient us. So we move from our discussion in Imperial over to Sugar Creek here, down 90. So this is located off Century Square Boulevard and Sugar Creek Center Boulevard, shown here in this vacant property just south of 90 and north of 59. So it is an 8-acre property shown as 2 districts, District A and District B. District A proposed with the 387 multifamily units broken up as shown, 15 live-work units with the non-residential on the ground floor, as well as additional non-residential space on the ground floor and an integrated structured parking garage, as well as some on-street parking. District B is proposed as 3 buildings to be developed as either restaurants or retail. It includes an outdoor event lawn space, outdoor dining area, and works to kind of activate that street level pedestrian activity there on the access drive. So this is the proposed layout. We have District A. This is Century Square Boulevard here, Sugar Creek Center Boulevard, and this is the internal access drive that would need to be constructed to access the site, and then District B here. And just focusing in on District A and B briefly, it is proposed as 5 stories for the residential component and 6 stories for the structured parking garage integrated into the overall building design. The live-work units are situated along the ground floor, street-facing, both the internal access drive and Century Square Boulevard, with some features to distinguish them and integrate them into that public realm, the private patios, those larger storefront windows, unique signage, form-based differentiation features there. It also includes approximately 2,400 square feet of non-residential space on the ground floor and about 8,000 square feet of support areas for the multifamily. So the office, fitness center, amenity center, all open to the residents and public. The proposed uses, and this focuses in on some of the live work units for professional office, perhaps some retail, as well as the additional non-residential space that's allocated on the ground floor as well. And then this is the conceptual design, what the commission saw at the public hearing. For this being the view from Sugar Creek Center Boulevard and the internal access drive here, where my mouse is going, and then some insets of, you can see some of the live work units facing the access drive, and then some of this additional non-residential space here facing outward towards the street. And then District B, designed with 3 separate buildings at 3,800 square feet, includes the outdoor event lawn area between the buildings, outdoor seating options to serve the restaurant development, located in on the pedestrian network there on the internal access drive. And that use list focuses on restaurant and retail, but there is an ability to have some limited service there if they choose. And then the conceptual designs, again, this is, what the commission saw in January as well. So the view here from Century Square Boulevard down that internal access drive, so to be District A and District B, and then kind of from the other end, from that public plaza at the corner of Sugar Creek Center Boulevard, and you can see on the right now, District B, and the left, District A. So just take a couple slides here to recap briefly on the public hearing, and then we'll go into further about what was discussed at the meeting and some further slides. But ultimately, we were able to receive feedback and questions to both staff and the applicant team. There were several members of the public that spoke, both for and against, and provided feedback. Many of those were representing the Sugar Creek community. Overall, the questions were based on, the development proposal itself, what it is, what isn't, discussion on traffic concerns, a discussion on the economics of the project, the market here in Sugar Land, as well as discussions on the land use plan itself and what guidance it provides. And wanted to note that the applicant team did provide a response that was included in the commission's report as Appendix A. So that was included in your report and also available in the report that was published on the website. There were a few minor modifications requested to be added to the actual PD material specific that were codifying the unit count for the multifamily and the live work, labeling the outdoor event lawn space, what the size of that was, and then adding the provision on cell towers not being on the rooftop. So those were also added to the PD in response to the commission. And then there was a discussion on District B and discussion on timing of construction and what that could look like in a PD ordinance. And we did consult with our legal team here in the city and took a look at methodologies that had been used in our previous PDs, not all over the city, as well as in other cities around Texas. So what we landed on was adding language to the PD document that we already require the installation of the internal access drive. That has to happen for access into District A. But what we added was including the streetscape elements on both sides of the street and installing that with the District A construction. So you'd have the District A side and then you'd have the streetscape elements on the District B side. Also included in that would be the public plaza area that's on the corner of District B at Sugar Creek Center Boulevard. So including that installation with the construction on District A. There was also discussion on a possible scenario if the live work units, a resident decided to stop operating their business in those live work units. So we have a provision now included that states that if a business is no longer operating in a live work unit, the tenant would be replaced in accordance with the lease terms as enforced by the property owner. So we did add those components into the PD based on some of those discussions that were held at the public hearing. So I'm going to pause for a few slides and hand it over to Devin Rodriguez with our economic development team and let her expand a little bit more on the discussion from the public hearing in regards to the economics of land use decisions and the market a little bit. So she'll take over a couple slides and then I'll be back up.
Down? Okay. Good afternoon, or good evening, sorry. Good evening, everybody. So I just wanted to touch on, there was a lot of questions about, the proposed land uses and market demand, and so we thought we'd just cover that a little bit. And I was going to start with this cycle, which I think we had this image, maybe it looked a little bit different, but from when we spoke last, and this is really kind of the economic principles of the cycle of what we do in terms of economic development and how that impacts land use decisions, how it impacts how land uses or development occurs in a community. So you'll see at the top there the primary jobs and destination venues. So for the Economic Development Department, our focus is on attracting and expanding and retaining primary jobs being jobs that produce services or products that are mainly consumed or used outside of the city. So not necessarily small business or service oriented that just service the community that they're in. So our focus is on attracting, retaining, and expanding those primary jobs. We also include the destination venues because for Sugar Land particularly, we have Constellation Field, Smart Financial Center, Houston Museum of Natural Science, all of these destination venues that we have that attract outside visitors in to bring those dollars that they are going to be spending in our community. So as the cycle is, we are focused on bringing in those jobs. Those jobs then create demand for housing. Also, those destination venues create demand for hotel rooms. That demand that comes from that additional population that is coming into the city, whether they're living or visiting, then creates the demand for retail. And so that's when you see those new retail or expanded retail establishments occur. And then obviously the revenues from those sales tax, property tax developments are then funneled into quality of life amenities and public services to the community. So I just wanted to kind of cover that because it's really important for us. And then when we kind of have to answer those market questions of what the drivers are and how that occurs. Oh, did I work? Okay. So several comments were made regarding the current market for commercial, retail, office, also asked about the submarkets. And so, I think I had made some previous comments, but, we went back and definitely looked through some more about submarkets. And the important thing is that utilizing the submarket is not really a accurate comparison tool because it's not based on a city's or other jurisdictional boundaries. It's based off of what are those area trends, and if those trends change over time, then those submarket boundaries also change over time. I also mentioned that we have a shallow office market, meaning that we don't have a large demand for office as compared to other markets in the region. The main point is that when the office market is booming and really doing great, we don't have a huge upswing. And then when the office market is really not doing well, we don't have a huge decrease. But the effects of the pandemic, we have, by Sugar Land standards, have had a significant impact on our office market. It is not as significant as other areas in the country, even in the Houston region as a whole, because of that shallow office market that I mentioned. And then there was also questions about the retail vacancy rates. We've also, I think, probably a surprise for folks because of the pandemic, but we have not seen a significant impact on our retail vacancy rates. They've actually been on a downward trend since the end of 2020. The staff report mentioned really the percentages between 6 and 7%. And so as long as it's under that 10% of vacancy, we consider that healthy for the retail market. And then just a couple of other notes that we included was that the sales tax collections have rebounded and increased significantly as of January 2022 as compared to the prior year. So we've really seen that rebound. We can, I think, safely kind of assume in terms of how these activities have happened due to the pandemic, that as our destination venues have opened, as people have also come to be more comfortable being in dining establishments and other retail, we are a big destination for that. And so we have seen that rebound in the sales tax collection. And like I mentioned, of kind of the original of, these are all examples of those economic principles of the supply and the demand. As we have more of population buying power in a community, it's going to create demand for housing, retail, and then also show that in the revenues that are coming into the city. And then there was also a question about Town Square specifically. And so just to note that Town Square is at 86% occupied and 90% fully leased. So there are some, the difference being that there are some that are currently working on their tenant improvements and will soon be open. And then there was also some questions about the housing market and employment, and I talked a little bit about our workforce study. And so over the last 5 years, the employment in Sugar Land has grown 14%, is what our workforce study quoted. But we have experienced limited growth of just 1.4% in terms of our population. So we're importing a lot of folks every day for their employment here, and that has been a huge growth. And then while our population has had very limited growth. And this really could be attributed to, we don't have a lot of new housing that is being developed. And so our population isn't going to be growing extensively. But it also signals that there is a demand for those housing and other opportunities to convert the employees that are coming into the city every day to become residents in Sugar Land. And so I think that is my last slide. And so I will turn that back over to Lauren.
We'll keep Devin and her team around for some questions afterward too. So I'm going to touch on the multifamily market in Sugar Land a little bit. There was discussion around our current multifamily market here and the surrounding area, which led to a series of questions on the current number of multifamily that's built, whether there's any currently being built, and then sort of segued into a discussion on market rent and occupancy rates. So currently inside the city limits, there are 3,070 multifamily units built. Now that accounts for 7.9% of the current overall housing built in the city. Currently, there are no other multifamily projects under review or under construction right now in the city limits. What we did find in looking at the rent and rates based on that discussion was that they have been increasing in Sugar Land over the last 5 years, while during that same time period, the inventory of the multifamily is stagnant. It hasn't grown. So our occupancy rates remain constant at 95% or higher, and our market rent and occupancy rates continue to increase. These graphics help a little bit if you're a visual person, but really what we analyze from that is when there's increasing market rents, there's increasing occupancy rates, there's an increase in demand. So that's what we're seeing in some of these, in some of our research here. And then the discussion continued regarding comparison of Sugar Land multifamily to surrounding areas such as Stafford, Missouri City, some of that submarket that Devin touched on a little bit. But like she said, it's important to note that the markets are not a comparable source to Sugar Land. She mentioned the employment hub being larger here in Sugar Land, our higher median household income here, and then those kind of other areas don't have the level of tourism destination venues and aren't that draw as much for folks. And then on average, when we took a look at rents, both in Stafford and Missouri City, they have lower market rents per multifamily unit here than here in Sugar Land. And that was a question that we wanted to respond to, certainly. So I'm going to take the next couple slides just to touch on development code guidance that we have when it comes to developing PDs and certainly developing PDs with multifamily. So we touched on this first bullet at the public hearing, but just reiterating that the intent of the PD is not to avoid zoning regulations. It is a zoning regulation. It is a PD zoning ordinance designed to really see if we could permit new or innovative concepts. That, how can we utilize the buildings differently? How can we create different form? How can we introduce different land uses in different areas? And all provided that we're following and being consistent with our city goals, our comprehensive plans, our master plans, and our policies. The development code does include components that are to be included with any PD submittal, both guides for urban and suburban requirements for PD districts that include multifamily proposals. There's an entire table in the development code that we evaluate PD district proposals on, and those that include multifamily. And when we evaluated this proposal against that table, it aligned with all of the requirements in that table. The mix of uses integrated into the development, the integrated structured parking, promoting that active pedestrian environment with wider sidewalks, with the trees, with the open spaces, and then focusing in on the building itself with minimum height requirements in that in the development code table, as well as focusing on a higher quality building finish material as well. So I'm going to transition into our land use plan guidance, and we'll spend the majority of our time here for this report. So we talked about this at the public hearing, but I think it's good to look at the vision again that was established in the plan, the citywide vision. The result of the 5-year citizen-led committee with community input adopted by council, really saying that we'll develop and redevelop and remain a desirable place to live and do business. We'll change in response to shifts in market demands, demographic trends, but also preserving our overall appeal of Sugar Land. Balancing land uses, preserving character of our neighborhoods, creating these new walkable mixed-use activity centers with a variety of uses. So the plan outlines specific goals and policies that work to achieve that vision statement. And when evaluating this proposal, it aligns with several of those. I'm going to highlight just a couple. So goal 2 of the land use plan is creating mixed-use activity centers. And this talks about having activity centers that will be mixed use, compact, walkable, have that active public space. And there's several policy statements, one of them being 2A, supporting the creation of these regional activity centers through both development and redevelopment. It should contain a variety of uses and serve as a destination in the area. A couple other policy statements. Need proposals evaluated using the transportation analysis, the school impact analysis, which we touched on at the public hearing as well, including public spaces, accommodating different activities throughout the day in the different areas. And then a focus in policy 2F on design, designing streets and designing the buildings themselves, the streets and access so that they emphasize pedestrians, designing the buildings so they pull up more towards the street. So the design component comes into play with goal 2 of creating those centers. And goal 3 is encouraging residential options. So this is about offering a mixture of residential options in a variety of settings to appeal to a wide range of people. And the key policy statement here focuses on new multifamily units and how to integrate them into this mixed-use setting and how to make them appropriately scaled to the surrounding, to the existing environment, and then design, again, back to that design to retain their value over time. And then the policy guides how to, preserve our single-family neighborhoods. We understand that Sugar Land is a single-family neighborhood predominantly, and so it was important to ensure an appropriate mix of housing options available. So the plan calls for an overall ratio of single-family to multifamily of the 88% to the 12% multifamily. Policy also provides design guidance for developing multifamily, adding to that cohesive mix of uses, that cohesive nature of the development, integrating in, and then with the goal of improving the long-term value, again, back to those design elements and the form. And then goal 4, talking about a great place for business. And this is, the Sugar Land will be a regional employment center, great place to do business, community that fosters small business. And this one it focuses on several things, but it does specifically talk about the live workspaces, and that in new development or redevelopment, encouraging storefronts or offices, but also live workspaces for accommodating lifestyle choices for someone who may want a small business, an entrepreneurial startup, but they may want to live and work in close proximity. So I'm going to step back here and take a look at what is a regional activity center. That came up several times during the public hearing, and think it's important to touch on it in a few slides here and a few graphics that we have in the slides. So again, the land use plan, it designated 5 areas as regional activity centers. They are designed or stated they can support multifamily residential developments, but with certain parameters. These regional activity centers were based on a number of key kind of items, but really one of the big ones is proximity to major roadways. You'll see that all of them are located off of highways, major thoroughfares, but also looking at the existing level of activity that was in the activity center. Most of them are developed, so we're looking a lot at redevelopment, a lot at infill development. So when designating these activity centers, that was important to look at what's currently going on in them. What are some of the existing uses, the built environment, what is around them, all with that goal of becoming compact, walkable, integrated development. Each should contain a variety, a mix of uses. And again, like I said, most of them formed through redevelopment and infill of these kind of existing areas. So this is the 5 regional activity centers map here. This is Sugar Creek Triangle, the one we're talking about this evening. The next slide, we'll look at that a little bit closer. So just briefly touch on the other 4, just for kind of context of, again, what a regional activity center is. So this is Imperial. We have Constellation. This is Highway 6, just, again, proximity. Highway 6 and 90, Constellation Field, the Overture Senior Living, the Ballpark Multifamily, the townhomes and patio homes here, and then the Imperial Historic District area. And then we move down Highway 6 to Lake Point. And this has a lot of residential, different types of residential, townhomes, live-work townhomes, single-family patio homes. We have the hospital, grocery store, restaurants, hotels, 2 hotels in this activity center. This is 4th one, Sugar Creek Town Center. This is where we are here. However, it includes a lot more than just here. It includes the First Colony Mall. It includes Methodist Hospital. It includes the area behind Methodist with the kind of office complex there, and as well as the retail and restaurants that are across town center from here. So this is a little over 200 acres here in this activity center. Then we go down to the university one. So majority of this land is University of Houston owned land that you see kind of where my mouse is here. Then on the other side of university, we have Texas Instruments and then the Smart Financial Center. So this one's definitely focused in a little more on entertainment with the Smart Financial Center there. But you can see, again, all of them are largely already developed as kind of already developed car-centric areas right now. So focusing in on the Sugar Creek Triangle Regional Activity Center. So again, it's about 145 acres shown here, 90, 59. And then again, just to highlight, this is the 8-acre development being discussed this evening. And again, just want to reiterate that the 8 acres does not constitute the entire regional activity center. It's part of the overall regional activity center, as you can see, and intended to add to the overall mix of uses. We have office, we have the trampoline park, we have mini storage, there are hotels, there's 1 car dealership, about to be 2, there's restaurants, gas station, convenience store, commercial services. Really kind of hits on a lot of uses here. So it's important to see, and again, this is largely developed. We have the site that the council just approved for the car dealership. And then it's really this site and this site that, you got to take a look at for redevelopment or for infill development opportunities. So that segues into what we're referring to as incremental implementation. So we came to that, we kind of landed on that from 2 things. The previous commission feedback received, as well as policy guidance from the land use plan and specific language from the land use plan. So the workshop that we held with the commission in January of 2020, we asked the commission whether all elements of the Regional Activity Center should be required in each development proposal. And the feedback we received was that it would depend. It would depend on the project and its context in the Regional Activity Center, the location of the Regional Activity Center, the size of the site, the built environment, the existing uses in place, the surrounding uses. And so it really needed to depend on the context of which Regional Activity Center, where it is, and the project itself. So what was kind of landed on in that workshop was that some elements of the Regional Activity Center just could not be established in a single proposal. When we go back to the image of the Regional Activity Center, the 145 acres, and then look at what you have available to infill develop or redevelop, however that happens, it was a reality that all the elements could not be established in a single proposal. So that was our guidance that we received from the commission. And again, the commission suggested, and it's in alignment with the land use plan, that all development proposals should contribute to the overall implementation of the Regional Activity Center. Each phase should contribute to the ultimate intended mix of uses. And so specifically, and each Regional Activity Center in the plan talks about what it is and what the first phase of development or redevelopment should have. And this one, being an office-centric Regional Activity Center, should have the first phase of its development include uses to balance those existing office uses, and it specifically calls retail or residential. So this being an infill development proposal contributes to the ultimate intended mix of uses in this Regional Activity Center. So I'm going to move to some guidance for multifamily from the land use plan. We touched on some of it, so I'll just kind of highlight again. The Regional Activity Centers are the areas that support multifamily residential development with certain parameters. We have the sort of the pillars, if you will, of how to develop multifamily, guidance to develop multifamily in these activity centers. One of them being no new standalone multifamily complexes. It needed to have that, it needed to be in a mixed use environment, vertically, horizontally, and the plan provides guidance for those. It also includes, as I mentioned, the specific design elements that were outlined to lead to those integrated mix of uses, to dictate form of the building and how it could look as part of the center. And then activating that pedestrian space is a key element that lives throughout all the guidance for these regional activity centers. And then additional studies being requested. We've touched on those. We'll hit them again. Traffic and school. And then utilizing that structured parking, that integrated structured parking garage, integrated into the multifamily development. A request was also made during the public hearing for information on the calculated number of multifamily units in each regional activity center. So back during the 5 years of the LUAC, of the Land Use Advisory Committee meeting, they evaluated a number of components of each regional activity center and the characteristics of each, and were able to determine an appropriate number. This was based on the regional activity itself, as I mentioned previously, its built environment, its current land uses, what it looked like then, as well as in response, really being sensitive to the nature of multifamily in the community and previous community feedback that had been received for years leading up to the land use plan regarding multifamily in the city, but also recognizing the unique characteristics and the capabilities of each regional activity center to include multifamily with these parameters. So the current ratio, as I mentioned, is 92.1% single family and 7.9% multifamily in the city. The district at Sugar Creek proposal would take that citywide multifamily percentage to 8.8% of the residential, continuing to be under the 12% that was outlined in the plan. There was additional discussion that kind of came off of our discussion on the multifamily units to provide awareness around the idea that requests could be made in the future for additional multifamily units, either within this regional activity center as well as any of the others citywide. So additional information was requested on the process of what that would look like. And I think first and foremost, it's important to just note that we would not take any changes to the plan lightly. This was done over 5 years with a lot of meetings and a lot of public time and a lot of public input. And so we wouldn't take any requests for modifications of any sort lightly. But also with the realization that the plan was not intended to be static. It needs to be living document, needs to be reevaluated over time to ensure it continues to meet the needs of the city and of our community and address city and city council priorities as well. But just to touch on it, what the process would be, obviously we would start with extensive public engagement. That's where this all started. That's where any change to the plan would also start. Engaging the public and going through that process, however long that took, whatever that looked like, and then culminating with going through, if we decided to move forward with public hearings, and then ultimately adoption of an ordinance. But it would provide a lot of opportunities for feedback on any proposed changes to the plan. So touch a little bit on additional studies. Just going to reiterate here that multifamily developments in regional activity centers do need to include additional studies, transportation, school impact. We talked a little bit about the school impact study at the public hearing. It was performed by the demographer that is used by Fort Bend ISD, indicating minimal impact on the schools and yielding about 29 students once fully occupied, ultimately attributing that low student ratio to the mix of the unit types being primarily the live work and the studio and the one bedroom. So that was study was provided to the commission at the public hearing and to the public with that report that was online, and then we'll also provide it to the school district. So traffic, we heard several comments made during the public hearing regarding perceived traffic impacts from the proposed development. There were also several comments made from the public regarding existing traffic concerns inside the Sugar Creek neighborhood, including along Sugar Creek Boulevard and Country Club Boulevard, as well as other local neighborhood roads internal to the community. So we heard those. We went back, we researched the number of complaints received for the Sugar Creek neighborhood to be 3 formal received since 2016, mostly on Country Club Boulevard, with a concern on speeding and cut through traffic there as part of one of those 3 complaints. So the city did, just for purposes of the conversation, complete restriping project on Country Club Boulevard in 2013. That was in response to some concerns at that time and around the beginning of 2010 to discourage speeding, to narrow the roadway to discourage speeding, and then those pavement improvements and striping were updated in 2019, again based on some resident feedback that we had heard from one of those complaints. And then, as we mentioned at the public hearing and have talked about, the TIA was conducted for the study area. This is the proposed site here. I'll try to circle it with my mouse. The study area is the circle. However, that is looking at traffic counts at major intersections. So, here, these major intersections that are inside this study area. It did identify need for turn lanes on both Century Square Boulevard and Sugar Creek Center Boulevard, as well as some stop bars in that median area here that will help get you in and out of that access drive. But again, city staff reviewed the TIA and concurred with the TIA findings, noting that the development's not expected to significantly impact Sugar Creek neighborhood south of 59. That was the concurred findings in the TIA. So I'm going to finish out here a couple slides, wrap up my presentation with our guidance and whether or not the proposal is consistent with the land use plan guidance. So again, it identifies these regional activity centers to include a variety of uses, integrated together in a more compact, walkable environment. Since the Sugar Creek Triangle Rack is close to fully developed, any infill development should bring that greater mix of uses, should encourage that more walkable overall area. Again, currently, as we looked at on the map, there's offices, retail, restaurant services, hotels, car dealerships, a lot of uses, but that missing element from the plan being that residential to achieve that ultimate intended mix of uses in the RAC, which is what this proposal brings forward. Plan states that developments should engage pedestrians and activate the street. It should build along wide pedestrian zones. Primary entrances of buildings should be built along it. They should include seating, they should include lighting and furniture and trees, and all contributing to that mix, that walkable, integrated nature. And so the proposal does utilize several of those features to activate the pedestrian area, wider sidewalks, the seating, outdoor public spaces, landscaping, furniture, as part of this development proposal. The purpose of the live work units is to also further activate that street frontage. This has support from specific policy guidance that we took a look at on the live work, as part of that goal about a great place to do business and accommodating lifestyle choices where professionals may want to conduct business in their home, have a separate entrance for that. And the live work units are designed and have of design form around them to integrate them into the pedestrian realm, to use those patio features to open up into it. They have the larger windows, they have different canopy features, architectural features to distinguish them as well. And then the live work units, again, align with that policy guidance on creating vertical and then horizontal mix of uses. That was guidance we also received from the commission in that January of 2020 workshop, where we received guidance from the commission that a live work component could meet the plan expectations for vertical integration in this mixed use setting if the non-residential uses were incorporated on the ground floor. So that aligns with the guidance we received from the commission, the policy guidance in the plan, and that statement kind of supporting the great place for business goal. And then District B creates additional activation as well, pedestrian activation, including those outdoor seating areas on the sidewalk, pulling the buildings closer to the access drives in the sidewalk, and then having that outdoor event lawn area. So again, alignment with specific plan policy guidance as it relates to mixed use centers and having multifamily in these mixed use centers. And then again, plan guidance is for creating the mixed use setting and placing multifamily's fitness center, leasing office, amenity centers on that first floor, and that's activating that horizontal mix of uses too, and that's specific guidance that we have in the plan. Also, guidance for uses and having the overall mix of use to support services for daytime office population, but also ability and services and restaurants and retail for that evening resident population as well. The proposal also includes that additional non-residential space on the first floor in addition to the live work units, maximizing more of that ground floor non-residential use integration as part of the overall regional activity center. And with that, staff does support recommendation of approval for the proposed rezoning from business office to plan development, known as the district at Sugar Creek. Staff supports this recommendation to the mayor and city council based on a determination that it aligns with the land use plan guidance for the regional activity center, as well as the PD regulations that are established in the development code. So I'm going to stop talking and hand it over to the commission for action and discussion. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right. Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, so first of all, I'd like to, thank everybody for all of their comments and particularly to staff from all the work that they did since the last meeting. So I think the packets that were put together provided a lot of information with regards to a lot of the comments that were made in the previous meeting. One of the things that I still have some concerns about is more about in the area that this is, it is more commercial and gotten good education on the land use plan tonight, even more so. But it is about the walkability and the linkage. So some of the things that we talked about in the last meeting were that, you know, the restaurants and the things that will really probably be more of the draw would be more of a second phase, but now at least a part of the plan. Is there any thought about making that area even more open? So I've been looking at the plans. I know that there's a drive-through, but it looks like there's an area that if you were to block off that street, you may be able to at least make it more enticing and build something in that area in the interim before the restaurants are built, because I'm assuming this will be months after the multifamily building is built that the restaurants would become open.
Thank you, Jeff Simpson. To take apart the question, so in terms of blocking off of that street during development, that's certainly possible. And then utilizing that 1.85 acres for something in the interim is also possible. It's been suggested that we go ahead and we'll grade the entire area, et cetera, at the same time. So we have workable space on that 1.85 acres. So there are different things that you could do. You could have a series of food trucks and eateries and things like that just to start activating the area while the multifamily is being built and starting to get leased up, and the businesses along the street are starting to fill up, at which point we would work backwards and come to the point at which we start plans with a restaurant, go through the process of getting the buildings permitted for the restaurants, and then ultimately building them and opening them with the goal of hitting them being open when the units are around 70% occupied.
Okay.
I think that answered your question, but
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. And then the other question I have within the commercial that's around there, I know you were labeling off all of the other things. So there are a few restaurants. There are things that are more walkable in that area then that would be more things that would entice people. It's not necessarily all just commercial, like office buildings in that space, correct?
Right. I'm going to try to go back.
I know you were really good about label when you had the
It's
one map
we'll
up
go
there.
back to it. It's helpful to look at a map. There we go.
Yeah.
Right. So this is an office here with a parking garage. This is where I think you're talking about. There's restaurants and retail. There's swim school. I'm trying to think of all the stuff that's in there, but yes. There's more, I guess, there's more than just office.
Just office buildings,
correct. Yeah, in this kind along Century Square here, certainly.
Okay. Thanks for the clarity.
Thank you. Commissioner Hart? Yeah, thank you. Staff did a lot of work, and wow, there's a lot of reading. Thank you for all that. Appreciate that. Also, again, thank you to everybody that came and spoke up. It's a passionate issue on both sides. I appreciate all that. I'll say that Mr. Mueller took a lot of my fire tonight when I came here to talk about this development. Well, that's okay. He probably presented a little more eloquently than I was going to. But I think the commission needs to determine whether this is going to be a regional activity center or not in this whole triangle. To me, that this development could possibly be a successful apartment complex with a commercial development across the street, but it's not going to make this a successful regional activity center. I appreciate the people that like town center. I do too. I think this is a great development. This does not make this regional activity center, town center, in my opinion. It never will. It's just not enough space in 8 acres to do that. So what are we really looking to approve? To me, we're looking to approve an apartment complex with a commercial development across the street. 15 units is 3.6% of that building. 96% is apartments. To me, that's a standalone apartment complex, not a mixed-use development. That's just my opinion. A Ferrari and a Ford are both cars.
Sure, and
I don't know that that's... Again, I think this This would not be a slum as an apartment complex. I disagree with that comment. These are high-end apartments. High-end people will be there with high rents. It's a professional development. It's just, what are we approving? Are we approving a regional activity center development, or are we approving a standalone development on 8 acres that's an apartment complex and a commercial development?
Sure.
So
And to your comment, just to provide perspective on what we're talking about, it's not an apples to apples comparison with Town Square here. This was all greenfield, and we had the ability, we had a master developer, one developer that came in and took this land down and built this entire area. So that's what's unique about the plan itself, and trying to incrementally get to where the plan wants to be.
And I agree with that, and I know that's not the case. This is not town center. I'm more alluding to the fact that they were trying to get that feeling of town center, not duplicate the layout of the 40 acres, but that feeling of walking downstairs, going through the park, having these open areas. It's not going to happen with this 8 acres. So we would do a real disservice to this regional activity center. Like Mr. Gilbert said, this might be the right place for multifamily. We don't know, because we never followed through with the rest of the land use committee's recommendations, of which I was a part of. And I do remember this area, and I do remember we kind of force-fed, at least in my memory, we force-fed the regional activity center in this area, because there was no, I guess, anchor activity or anchor draw to this area like the other 4 did, or had the possibility for redevelopment like the floor area did with the open space. So again, I'm asking the commissioners to think about this. What are we approving? Do we want this area to be a regional activity center, or are we just going to want apartments and some commercial development? I'm not against a multifamily use or a activity center approach. This just doesn't meet those requirements in my mind. Maybe to the letter in some places it does align with it, but again, I was on the Land Use Advisory Committee. We thought of town square, and I know that most of us had that in our mind, and this is not achieving that. So I guess those are my comments. I didn't have any other questions about it, but thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown.
Thank you. As Commissioner Hart said earlier, first item agenda in this one. Thank you, everyone, for your input. In today's world, we've got to remember, as I tell my family, not everyone likes asparagus. We got to remember that we're all a little bit different. We got to find a way to make these things work together. And that's what brings us together, and that's what makes us unique. So thank you for your input. Thank you, staff. You did a great job putting that packet together. And I guess so my first question goes to staff, and Commissioner Hart was just talking to this point. Does this meet the spirit of a regional activity center? Understanding that you said earlier very well that this was a greenfield area before. I understand that. But going back and retrofitting a regional activity center in an area could almost be labeled as possible. We heard very early on that we weren't meeting the requirements. What is staff's view? Are we meeting the requirements of the land use plan with this particular development?
By not saying that this development is the regional activity center, which I think was your question. Do we think this development is no infill or redevelopment of one site is going to be the 145 or 200 acre or 100 acre regional activity center? That's just not a reality. So does it
This is as a component. This is a component that fulfills.
Does it meet the plan guidance for how to incrementally in a phased infill development approach align with the guidance in the land use plan? That's, I think, what we've discussed this evening.
And that's your opinion and the staff's and city's opinion that it is, in fact.
That is staff's evaluation of the land use plan.
Okay, perfect. Forgive me, I started out with 1 page of notes and I'm up to 5, so I may not be real congruent in my questions, but I want to make sure I cover them. We looked at the schools and the school study. Looks like we're going to add 29 students. I feel comfortable the school's got room for that. We looked at the traffic studies. We looked at the traffic counts. We think that that's 90 vehicles going south, 180 vehicles going north per day when you look at the numbers that are there. I drove the area extensively last week and got out and walked around quite a bit, and you look at the other office buildings and the other businesses that are in this area, and if you break this down on a per square foot density, when you're looking at how many people might or might not be in this apartment complex, depending on how many people fill them up versus someone in a building, is it going to be that different when you look at a per square foot density? Have you looked at that at all to figure out that if we built a 4-story building over here and we put it full of doctors and full of whatever, what's the typical guidance from the city on that compared to apartments?
Sure. I mean, well, we do the same thing. We'd have to do the TI. We do them with every development, every site plan from an administrative standpoint. But your point is a good one. I mean, it's like when we zone commercial for a restaurant, you could have 3 Starbucks next to each other and you'd never be able to go anywhere. So, you know, this site as its current zoning is office, and it could have another Comerica building. It could have a 10-story office building. And yeah, you're right. The traffic is a lot from a 10-story office building. Yeah.
Did the traffic study take into consideration where the traffic went beyond the intersection at 59? Is it going to go down Club Creek, or is it only 10%? I understand we don't have a crystal ball and we can't see that.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jason Vaughn with the Traffic Engineering Operations Division, City Public Works. With the traffic study, we looked at the area around the development. The traffic engineering practices look about a quarter-mile radius around there. So that radius took it near the 59 and Dairy Ashford interchange. But the study also looked at the traffic volumes going through the interchange heading south, and that's the numbers that you were mentioning.
But it didn't, again, you don't know who's going to move in and where they're going to go, but just beyond the interchange of that intersection, that's about as in-depth as it got.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And that, but what I can add is that I work for the city traffic engineer in that, and we were here at the last meeting. So to add to that, the city is investigating options right now for a separate traffic study, and that for the looking at cut-through traffic along Country Club.
Okay.
And that would be separate of this study.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you. For the developer, I've got a couple questions. For the retail development that you have going on, it's obviously very unique. It's a live-work environment. Have you built these other places besides what you're proposing here?
We have not built the live-work in any of our other developments. We have added retail into our other developments, but not live-work.
Any prospective tenants online? Have you reached out to other people to understand how this is going to work, what it looks like?
There's quite a bit of extensive research on this, a lot with the Urban Land Institute. We see it a lot in other cities. It is an established mixed use, if you will. It does add activity, and we have spent a lot of time. In fact, I think there was a public comment last time from a resident, I believe from Greatwood, who was a photographer who said that she'd like to sell her house eventually and utilize it. So those types of things, I mean, in the quantity, given that we're doing this on the active streets, it wouldn't make sense to do it where nobody can visit the business. We have no problem or any concern that those are not going to be full and vibrant.
Okay. What are I think I heard last meeting, your rental rates you thought were going to be starting at $1,850, did I hear correctly?
Well, starting at different, our average rental rates, just under $2,000, $2.30 a foot.
And that is that during lease up, or is that an entry rental rate?
Well, when we model these things out economically, we always add in 1 month free amortized over a 13-month lease,
Right.
which is 8.3%. And then once the project is full, those leases turn over and they sign up at the market rate at the time. So that's what we've modeled. And that's, but as of late in this tight market especially, it's entirely possible that we wouldn't have to add those concessions.
Yeah, because I was just curious as to what that rental rate looked into the future, because if you kind of reverse engineer this number, so to speak, and I did this based on an $1,800 a month rent factor, the equivalency is roughly a $350,000 home. And I'm not sure you'd call that, low income, right? I mean, that's not a low income, and I think it's an $80,000 a year qualification number, and of all the things we could choose to refuse this development on, I don't want to hang my hat on it being we're scared of low income housing, because I think that carries a lot of baggage with it that I hope that our city doesn't want, as part of that. And as passionate as Mr. Hart is about his, I think that's one thing I feel strongly about is, we got to be careful on how we hang labels around people and what that might look like. So
yes, sir.
I'm off my soapbox. So thank you, commissioners.
Thank you. Commissioner Ushold.
Thank you. Again, thanks for all the comments, both for and against. My first question is for Tim.
Whoa,
Just
whoa.
No, so no.
Make a general comment.
No, the
agenda
question really comes towards, and maybe Lauren can provide some insight, or some of our fellow commissioners can provide some insight. When we were creating this, one of the things that's been brought up is that the regional activity center as defined doesn't grab the area. Specifically looking at the other side, the south side of Highway 59. Was that considered, do you know, when the regional activity center was defined?
You're asking about the boundaries of?
Yes, ma'am.
No. Yeah, it was
Okay.
it was
No,
bounded,
that's-
really focused on being bounded by the two major highways as being kind of a key element of it.
No, and I guess, Lauren, I'll ask you this as well. When I look at, if you could put the map up of the other regional activity centers.
Sure.
As I look at all 5 of those, none of them are town center. And so I get concerned as a commissioner looking at this, that we're trying to recreate 3 blocks of one regional activity center and hanging that as our definition for every regional activity center that we go forward with. Because that's just not a reality that we can achieve. If we were to look at a similar project in Imperial, it'd have the same issues. The same thing if we looked at this on University, or even in across the freeway section. We would have these same topics, these same issues, which would basically mean that we couldn't add a multifamily complex if we held to that standard. So that's a real concern of mine, because I don't think that that's, I think what we're saying when we say things like that is that we don't want, as I heard some of the people say, those people in Sugar Land. And I get real concerned when I hear my fellow citizens say that. Yeah, I'll get off my soapbox now.
Let me address that.
No, you did not. No, Tim, you did not. I heard it from other public comments. Lauren, just a question for you. Since the guidance to only have mixed-use apartment complexes in Sugar Land was put in place, how many other apartment projects have been presented to Sugar Land since that was put in place?
We haven't reviewed any proposals.
Okay, so this is the first and only proposal that's come to us in 4 years?
The first application, to implement in a regional activity center. Imperial, the former Imperial Market had multifamily units that were approved as part of it. That was included in your staff report. So, but those are currently not built.
Okay. All right, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
You bet. Commissioner Parikh?
Well, I echo everyone's sentiments that this is a lot of work and there's a lot of passion and a lot of emotion. And I lived in the area where we did have multifamily come, so I can appreciate the fear and the concern around property values, traffic, crime, and schools. My question was somewhat related to that in the sense of in Telfair and the other multifamily developments where we've had these estimates for the number of kids that would impact the school. How far off were we in those estimations? Just to give us an idea of, yeah, we say this number now, but what is the confidence in that, and how far off have we been in other developments?
Yeah, so the requirement to do the school impact study came out of the land use plan. So
Okay,
that
so it predates. It's
yeah,
after that.
so that was
Yeah.
something that the community felt was important, and staff and you all in council to include when you talk about a multifamily development is engaging with the school district. So that became a component of the plan.
Okay. And the other thing, traffic related was, and I think Chuck, you mentioned this as well, I would have liked to have seen the impact study expanded. There was a lot of emotion, a lot of passion about wanting to understand, and again, we can't look into the crystal ball, but how that cut across into Sugar Creek is affected by this. And I would have liked to have seen that expanded just so we could get a feel for the broader impact, because this is going to change that community in that area significantly. And it's back there, it's not necessarily on the frontage, so there's going to be traffic that comes in and out that we can't foresee. So I would have liked to have seen a little bit, that be a little bit more expanded. That's just a comment, not really a question. In terms of the number of restaurants and the mix of retail to restaurants in the actual mixed use part, what does that look like? How many restaurants versus other things what are we expecting, and what is the impact of that going to look like?
Well, I can address the mix, and then I'll have to ask you what you mean by impact. But the 1.85 acres, we originally had thought that there would be 2 restaurants, and then when we got approached by and engaged the architect for the restaurateur that is interested in the site and worked with their architect, they planned 3 3,800 square foot restaurants with the park area, similar to the turf area here at City Center, La Cantera, whatever. So that actually got expanded from the original plan based on the restaurateur, their architect, and their experience. So that went up. In terms of the, I believe at our very first meeting, we heard a comment that we started off with 18 live-work units along the streetscape. And we heard that it would be a good idea to maybe consolidate 3 of those first floor and include a strictly retail spot. I recently got a call when I was traveling a couple weeks ago from a Sugar Creek resident who is starting a coffee business and is interested in that retail space. So that's the type of thing that we envisioned. And both the restaurateur and this particular gentleman reached out to us. We haven't even really made a broad effort. It's too early to do that.
Got it. That answers my question on that. I guess there's a lot of discussion on what is Iraq, how do we evaluate in the grand scheme of things, and I guess is that a Pandora's box that we can open based upon our decision here? How does that get looked at or reevaluated? And just a general question to the staff, I guess. And I'm looking this way, but I meant it for staff. Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah.
So what is your question?
I guess the question is, if there's disagreement philosophically and maybe even by the spirit of what this is or isn't, is there a mechanism that we have procedurally to go back and look at that as an item, or is that locked into the land use plan and that's expires at a date to be determined?
So you're talking about making changes to the land use plan?
Right.
Yeah, that is direction we would need to receive from administration or council or some type of larger discussion around that, and then we would launch into kind of that effort that I was talking about what it was, what the change was, engaging the public, going back through that process of doing that.
Okay. That's all I had. I was just curious about that.
Thank you. Commissioner Landine? Commissioner Simeon?
Yeah, it's getting late. I do want to thank everyone, and that includes all the professionals, all the consultants for all their hard work. And it's an incredible effort, and I think a quality, high quality facility. And by the accounting from our last meeting and this recap tonight, it checks every box in the land use plan. And it's almost as if it missed a box, they went back and made sure that box was checked. So where I'm going with this is kind of tied to what I said last time. And that is that I feel like this is parachuting into a business park. And I don't know that it qualifies for, if you put it here, they will come. And in this case, we'll paraphrase that and say, if you put this here, it will contribute to redevelopment. There's no denying it's part of a rack. We've proved that. I just can't imagine that because of its being here, that it will accelerate the redevelopment. Not at this location. That has more to do with the fact that it's not truly a destination. It's a work environment, and it's a retail environment. You mentioned gas stations and so forth in the vicinity, and some restaurants. I mean, I don't accept the fact that traffic is going to be a problem. It's surrounded by highways. I mean, I've seen a lot of traffic impact analyses over the years in my profession, and that's not part of it for me. And I read in the report in the documents that we received that the apartments went up across Dulles from Sugar Creek, and there wasn't any significant property value impacts from that. So I also don't really buy into the property valuation argument. So there are a few things here that I don't buy into that have kind of wrapped around my opinion here and allowed me to come to a decision. I think we have. Well, let me put it this way. When Commissioner Hart said, and I was not on the Land Use Committee, when Commissioner Hart said that if he recalled correctly, y'all struggled, the committee struggled to even qualify this as a potential rack location, I thought, well, I'm not surprised at that, just personally. I thought, and that was the first I heard of it, is when he mentioned it. I just see too much here and some key ingredients missing. For me, the whole idea of a rack lended itself to, I thought in terms of what's across the street. If we're ever to improve town center and contribute to town center and growing and becoming a rack or better, all those business owners over there would have to get in a situation where they're not making money, or their rents are low, or their vacancies are high, and they're just at their wits' end. And they would come together as a group. And the gentleman who spoke first spoke to that comprehensive approach. In my mind, that's always what it should be. So I'll stop and just say, although it checked all the boxes, and it did it quite well, I don't think it meets the threshold of being a catalyst or it will be a catalyst. Everybody made a good argument that there will be a catalyst, but we have to think in terms too of what's there and what it's going to take to have those owners and those businesses and those building owners and those tenants leave so that everything else can redevelop. And that's a heavier lift. because there's so much of it there. So that's what I have. There's really no question. I just want to thank everybody for all their efforts. Hi.
If I may. I just wanted to take the opportunity to address something that's kind of been restated a couple of times, and that's related to the struggle that the advisory committee may have had with this regional activity center in particular. I don't recall that, having been part of all those conversations. I do recall what the struggle was coming up with a recommendation on how to determine the number of appropriate multifamily units, whether it's this one or any of the other regional activity centers, knowing from the advisory committee standpoint, taking into consideration a lot of the feedback that they had heard throughout the 5 years of their work, balancing that with knowing that housing options, more housing options, more density in these activity centers was something that was needed and was kind of a goal of what they were trying to achieve in their recommendations. So it was more about kind of how to come up with something that balances both concerns and a desire to have other housing options in the city, and come up with something that made sense, that seemed to balance all of those kind of competing interests as part of the recommendation coming forward to through the land use plan update process. They, at the time, actually kind of probably took a more strict approach to only wanting vertical mixed use to be how multifamily would be suited in activity centers. I think through the discussion, both through the commission at the time and the city council, it ended up being that there were other ways that multifamily could be situated within an activity center so that it still achieves some of those elements of integration and activation, but that was kind of the level of struggle at the time with after kind of deciding that these were some of the appropriate areas for kind of increased activity and increased density for activity centers.
Well,
Just wanted to.
I appreciate that clarification, and that's fine. If it was as he recalled or was as you recalled, it's almost immaterial with me because I had the same feeling during our last meeting. It just is as good as it is, and as many boxes as it checks. It's an easy way to say it. I just foresee a more comprehensive approach as better. And what we might have discovered is, in this being our first venture down this road, you know, leaning on that land use plan, is that, you know, it might not have all the tools we need. I know it's no easy task. I don't even want to talk about revising that thing, but we're not going to know its shortcomings until we use it, and we're using it, and some of them are rearing their head. I think it's important that we just, you know, accept that, do the best we can, and go forward with what we think is best. You know, that's all we can do.
Yep. And I just kind of wanted to kind of provide my, I guess, experience having gone through that discussion as well. So not to mean that,
right.
Yeah, what you're stating was wrong.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Commissioner Brown, you had another question or comment?
Down. We've experienced a 14% increase in employment, correct? And a 1% increase in housing. If we don't build it here, Stafford's going to build it, someone else is going to build it, and I understand nobody wants an apartment in their backyard. I understand that, but just putting some icing on that cake. And then in terms of construction and what that might look like, if this moves forward, the retail space on the bottom floor, we talked about limiting cell phone antennas on the top of the building. There's a way to put a provision in there that if those first floor spaces are vacant, there's some kind of window covering or dressing on them that is congruent with the style and facade of the building so that it looks nice and we're not staring into empty spaces, again, if this moves forward. And I'm done. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. A couple comments from me, and then we'll take a vote. Number one, I really want to thank the applicant, and I want to thank the city staff. Regardless of what side of this issue that you're on, I don't think there can be any denial that there was just an incredible amount of work that went into this project. I think it's extremely thoughtful. I think the interaction clearly between the applicant and the staff is great. Staff, I know you guys spent countless hours throughout this process, so thank you for your hard work. I also want to thank everyone in the community who spoke on this issue, either for or against. As I mentioned at the last meeting, I think one of the things that makes our city great is the level of engagement and the level of professionalism and courtesy that people observe when they're engaging even on heated issues like this one, and it is a heated issue. It raises a lot of questions regarding the land use. I mean, the land use plan itself, is still to this day remains controversial, and I say that respectfully to my fellow commissioners that were on the committee, and we had at least one other member from the public who was here as well. I had my views on that at the time, and I won't go into them now. But we are seeing some of the things that creates. I think it's a great document. I think the guiding principles are good. At the same time, when we say, well, we just need to, if we don't like it, we'll just be flexible. We're talking about changing it. It just kind of for me re-raises the question of, well, what is it then? I do agree with Commissioner Simeon that this project seems to check most of the boxes on it, although I'm not a particular fan of the incremental manner in which we got there, because we said on one hand, okay, would every development within the RAC have to meet all of the criteria of the RAC? No. Well, you want retail. Could live work meet part of that component? Yeah, it could. So I don't love the way that it checks all the boxes, but I do think it checks all the boxes. And for me, the be all and end all is not how many of those boxes it checks. I think at the end of the day, we want to look at this. We want to look at the project itself. If it goes forward, for the applicant's sake, I hope it's successful. I think it has a lot of opportunity to be successful. I'm familiar with the area. I'm a Sugar Creek resident. I've spent a lot of time around that development. I think it's appropriate for that area. I really, really appreciate the fact that the applicant has ties to our community. I think the comments that you made in the initial presentation about your appreciation for our city and for the respect that you want to show the city and the residents, I think is important. I noted that, I don't think we had a single comment that anyone looked at the plan and said it was anything but spectacular. So I think it's really, really well done. And I will say, in my short time on the commission, I cannot remember another project where there has been more engagement between the applicant and city staff and the commission. You listened to everything that the community said. You listened to everything that we said. You reworked your plans. You brought it back. You tried to do what we tried to follow the direction that you got. No project's going to be perfect. I think this one looks like it has an opportunity to be successful, and I appreciate the economic development information on that and the need for that as well.
And on that note, I know there's been discussion on a comprehensive look at redevelopment, and redevelopment is an important topic right now. It's a city council top priority right now to look at redevelopment in the city, and so I think it is worth having just a quick kind of discussion on that. I mean, I don't know what you all saw in that handout. We weren't privy to that, but I think having just a quick conversation about that, because redevelopment is a key council priority right now, and I think it's important in the context of these discussions on activity centers. So I will leave you with Devin.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, so just to build on what Lauren was just kind of introducing, redevelopment is a hot topic. One of council's, actually 2 of the 4 of council's top priorities, from commercial redevelopment and residential reinvestment. So both topics covering redevelopment. So there was a lot of discussion around that. We'd like to see a comprehensive plan for this area. I'd like to bring to light that is most likely not realistic, market reality wise, for an area like that to have a comprehensive plan that was done and then roll it out. Even Town Square, which was a greenfield site, 32-acre greenfield site, and how many acres is this rack? 200 something or something? Yeah. So Town Square, greenfield, 32-acre area. This area was built in phases. It was done incrementally. It was not done all at once. I think that because of the way that Sugar Land has utilized master planning, we have gotten used to building things to a finished state. But when it comes to redevelopment, the only way forward is incrementally doing that, taking steps towards these are the goals that we've laid out, like what is talked about a lot in the land use plan, and with each project making steps towards that happening. We have the activity center implementation project that we're talking about right now that you all had a workshop on back in November, and there's going to be more discussions about that. And part of that is having a balanced approach, and how do we do that incrementally? Because not all the money in the world, or all the money that we have from an economic development perspective, is going to build out an activity center that large that's already developed, already has a lot of value. So there's a lot of market realities that go into that. My main point being is, if we're going to want to do redevelopment in these activity centers, it is going to have to be done incrementally. And we've got a lot of challenges, and it's not going to be easy. And we're going to have to kind of take those steps one at a time to bring those different elements into the overall regional activity center.
Great.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
In case
Any
have
further
follow-up
discussion?
questions.
All right.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to dismiss this and deny the request for rezoning, and rather make a request to council to come up with a comprehensive plan for redevelopment of this as a proper regional activity center, and whether that results in this being the appropriate development in that location or not, let's at least let that happen.
I'm struggling to understand how we're going to make a motion suggesting that city council do something. So the idea,
I guess you'd have to
the
just say
item is, if you want to make a motion to,
or make that our recommendation,
that we not recommend approval, I think you could do that, and then I think we could see if there was a
let me
second,
say that,
and
to
we
make
could
not
vote on it.
to recommend not approval, but recommend that council take. I mean, they can commission it.
Yeah, my concern is the second part of that is not really in front of us right now. So I think there's a couple ways to do it. I mean,
Okay.
I'm gonna make a motion to recommend approval, but if you want to make a motion that we not recommend approval, that motion's been made.
Okay, so it doesn't.
Is there a second? No second. I will move that, I will make a move that we recommend approval of the rezoning of 8 acres from Business Office B0 to Plan Development PD, Final Development Plan FDP for the district at Sugar Creek to the mayor and the members of City Council.
I'd like to second.
All right, I've got a motion. I've got a second by Commissioner Ushold. Any further discussion? All right, vote at this time. All right, that motion passes by a vote of 6-2, which you can see displayed on the screen. Thank you, folks, and thank you, commissioners. Item 7A, reports. Planning and Zoning Commission liaison reports on the City Council meeting from February 15 and February 22nd, 2022. Who had those?
That would be me. I will keep this very short and sweet. I can't find my notes. They're buried in here. But no, here we go. I found it. Sorry. So the February 15th meeting, the only thing material to us was that council unanimously approved the ordinance amending the final development plan at the crossing at Telfair, which we approved. So they unanimously approved that. There wasn't anything else there material to us. In this week's council meeting, they had a discussion and presentations from all of the different department heads to review their strategic plans for next year. They looked at those. They agreed to meet in March to kind of look at the scale of how long they look into the horizon with regards to their strategic plans. So they're considering looking at a 2-year span instead of the 5-year typical span that they have. And that meeting in March is also going to inform the decisions going into the budget for next year. So that was pretty much it on the 2 council meetings.
Thanks very much. Item 7B, City Staff Report.
Only thing, excuse me, only thing I'll say, your next meeting, March 8th, we are still formulating the agenda and, but we anticipate definitely having a meeting. So that's all we have.
Thank you, Doug. Any further business?
Motion to adjourn.
I've got a motion to adjourn in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
We both said thank you.